near the end of the Old Republic, the Dark Lords of the Sith would come in numbers of just two, one master and one apprentice. However, it was not always this way. Around 1,000 years before the rise of Darth Sidious, the Sith were countless, a might known and feared throughout the galaxy. Lord Khan, founder of the Sith Brotherhood of Darkness and master of the dark side, is walking through a battlefield. Almost 100 Jedi and legions of Republic troops had attempted to stop Lord Khan and his army from taking control of the planet. The Republic lost. Lord Khan had captured the planet. As he passed by the still warm bodies on the battlefield, he indulged in the suffering and pain that now haunted the area. In the distance, you could see a storm coming. The lightning crackles lighting up far away. You could see the glorious Korriban Sith temple. Khan was on his way to meet with two members of his brotherhood, one human and the other Twi'lek. Cordis and Kopej, two powerful Sith masters. A long time ago, these Sith were rivals. Now, they fight together in Khan's brotherhood. Khan approaches the two Sith. Cordis was tall and very thin, looking very skeletal, whereas Kopej was a heavy-set Twi'lek. But don't let his size cloud your judgment of his capabilities. Cordis began telling Khan that the victory today was glorious. It has been too long since the Sith have had an academy on Korriban. Khan is pleased about placing an academy here, as it will provide more powerful new Sith to his army. Kopej liked to make sure that Khan understood that they were equals. Kopej corrects Lord Khan with, "Don't you mean powerful Sith for us?" With Khan replying, "Of course. Just a slip of the tongue." Cordis points out that Kopej seems uneasy about the current situation. Khan puts his hand on the Twi'lek's shoulder and says, "Korriban is more than a victory. It's a message to all the Jedi and the galaxy. The Brotherhood will be known. The birthplace of the Sith is ours." Desel was a miner on a Potros, stuck in a line of work that barely got him by. He'd been working for hours. His arms were tired from holding the heavy equipment used to mine. Dust would be flying around constantly, and rocks that were smashed apart would blast into different directions. With no mask or face shield, he had to bear it all. All that could be heard was the loud smashing and hammering. Desel was mining a substance known as cortosis, resistant to heat and energy. It can be used for the production of armor and shields, whether it's commercial or military interests. This made for a profitable business within a galaxy at war. Not that Des would see the better end of that, despite his hard work. It was said that cortosis alloys could withstand the effects of a lightsaber. This meant that mining cortosis would be no easy task. Energy tools could not be used to mine. The only thing that works is using a hydraulic jack. The sheer force of hitting the vein so hard would eventually chip it away. This had dramatic effects on the equipment though, as they would blunt quickly and clog up from the surrounding dust. Des had been mining for at least 6 hours. Eventually, he knew his equipment would blow out. You see, the company in charge of the mining operations was the Outer Rim Ore Works, also known as Aura. They much preferred to replace broken equipment with more cheap equipment, rather than sinking credits into maintaining the gear. Aura paid the miners depending on how much they brought back, so Des knew he had to stay as long as he could. But alas, just as he predicted, his gear conks out after all the dust builds up inside. Des throws the tool to the ground. Just as he does, someone approaches from behind and says, "Move over, kid." It was a common theme in the mines for other workers to take over on cortosis veins, but such a thing wasn't done unless you were looking for trouble. Des had purposely ventured further into the shafts than the other workers, so he could work alone and keep his spot. The worker that had approached Des was none other than Gerd, an old friend of Des's father, from back when Des first worked at the mines at age 13. He's been working there now for 10 years. Hurst was the name of Des's father. He had no love for Des, and would always be teased and abused growing up, not just by his father, but the other miners too, including Gerd. Des told Gerd to back off. This was his spot, but Gerd was insistent that he wanted to take over. Technically, Gerd had every right to the spot, seeing as Des's equipment already broke, but trying to take over this way is just wanting to start a fight. While it's true Des was teased growing up, he eventually grew to be the biggest worker of all, bigger than Gerd too. Des points out to Gerd that none of his friends are around, so he should back off his claim, and nobody gets hurt. Gerd replies with insults and stammers, "You don't even know what day it is, do you?" It was at this point Des could tell Gerd had been drinking, and now he's trying to pick a fight. Gerd says to Des, 5 years ago today your father died, and you don't even remember. Des wasn't fond of his father at all. In fact, he had almost forgotten he existed. He was glad to be free after his sudden heart attack 5 years ago. He tells Gerd, "Can't say I miss Hurst the same way you do, Gerd." Gerd was disgusted that Des hadn't called him father. He calls Des an ungrateful son of a calf hound. Des tightens his posture to try and intimidate Gerd, but it doesn't work. He's too drunk right now for reality to scare him. Gerd continues to scold Des, reminding him that his father always used to say there was something wrong with him. Gerd looks right at Des and says, "Bane." Des's reaction to the name was clear it had an effect, but he didn't lash out. Hurst used to call him that name when he was drunk. Bane. Hurst blamed Des for his mother's death. He said Des was the bane of his existence. As a child, Des was hurt most when his father called him Bane. It hurt more than any of the other abuse and violence he dished out. But Des is grown up now. He has learned to ignore it. Des tells Gerd he doesn't have time for this. He needs to keep working. Des had suggested earlier that if Gerd gave him his equipment, he would continue mining. Of course, Gerd did not agree. Des puts one hand on Gerd's shoulder and pushes him back, while he grabs his tool with the other hand. The drunken Gerd stumbles backwards and trips over, hitting a rock on the ground. Gerd springs back up and yells, "Your daddy's been gone too long. You need someone to beat the sense back into you." He approaches Des with his fists ready in the air. Gerd was no fool. He knew to approach Des after he'd been working for many hours. He knew he'd be tired. Des's size wouldn't mean much in a fight when he's too exhausted. Gerd had been planning this all day. This meant nothing to Des. He would still fight. He throws the tool he stole to the ground and they both engage in melee combat. It was clear to Des straight away that he was tired and couldn't tap into the strength he would normally have before a long shift. They both exchange blows back and forth and neither appearing to give up. Des could feel his back going into a spasm, which would happen often to workers of the mine. This would only work to Gerd's advantage. Gerd began clawing at Des, attempting to gouge out his eyes. Des anticipated it and turned his head, leading Gerd to hit the upper section of Des's ear. When all of a sudden, Des felt a burst of fire and rage. His tiredness and pain was burned away. His body felt revived and strong. His mind was clear. Des knew what Gerd was going to do next. He knew every exact detail of what Gerd was going to do. Des didn't understand how he knew. It was like an instinct taking over, and this wasn't the first time it happened. He knew it was something more than instinct. What he knew was far too detailed and clear for it to be something such as instinct. It was much more like a look into the future, a vision. Whenever this would happen, Des would know exactly what to do. The next blow from Gerd is on its way. Des is ready for it. He saw it before Gerd knew he was doing it. As the fist came flying, Des moves and bites down on Gerd's fist, his teeth sinking and tearing through Gerd's flesh. Breaking his thumb away from his hand, Des timed it perfectly. Gerd was disabled and now squirming in pain. Gerd screamed in agony while Des spat the thumb out of his mouth to the ground. Des felt powerful. He had taken the fight out of his opponent and could now do anything he wanted. Gerd was begging for help. The old man had started the fight and now Des had finished it. He left Gerd and the mines to tell the foreman of what happened. Des wasn't worried about the consequences. He would maybe be fined 1 or 2 days' work. Oro didn't care about what happened in the mines, so long as the miners kept bringing back cortosis.